Good evening. Indian aviation, it seems, has a lot to look forward to. Abu Dhabi's Etihad Airways has confirmed that it has taken 24% minority stake in Jet Airways for $379 million. The Gulf carrier will subscribe to 27.3 million new shares at 754.74 rupees per share. Etihad, which seems to be on an aggressive expansion drive, will also make a $150 million equity investment in Jet's frequent flyer program and spend $70 million to buy Jet's 3 pairs of Heathrow slots through the sale and leaseback agreement announced in February. Jet's majority ownership will still remain with Indian nationals, and Jet's founder and non-executive chairman Naresh Goyal will hold 51% of the airline after the deal, which is subject to shareholder approval now. The Jet-Etihad deal marks the first step of FDI in aviation after India relaxed ownership rules last September. Prior to the deal, Jet shares flew into some turbulence as talks dragged over the deal. The stock has now gone up about 70% since November after the media reported a possible stake sale. Suddenly, the aviation sector is abuzz. The deal, some analysts say, can also set a benchmark of sorts for SpiceJet. SpiceJet has frequently been the subject of stake sale reports. Indigo, as well India's biggest carrier by domestic market share, is eventually expected to launch an initial public offering at some point as well. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on The Big Picture, we take a look at the Indian skies and the aviation players who fly those skies. We ask our panel whether the Jet-Etihad deal is a sign of more to come in the aviation sector. After negotiating prolonged turbulence, is the aviation sector finally in turnaround mode? All these questions and more on the show tonight. Joining me will be Mr. R. Krishnan, of course, senior journalist, editor of Cruising Heights magazine, Sanat Kaul as well, also an aviation analyst, and Mr. Ganapathy Subramaniam, senior journalist and also an old friend. Many thanks all of you for joining me on The Big Picture. I'd like to start with Mr. Ganapathy Subramaniam, if I could. So the deal sets a valuation benchmark for further investment in Indian airlines, which is what most analysts are saying now, with SpiceJet being one of those airlines who are frequently talked about in this sense. Indigo, also the biggest carrier by market share, is eventually expected to launch an initial public offering. Are things now finally changing or in turnaround mode for the aviation sector in India?
Athar, the most important thing is that a major hurdle to FDI in the aviation sector has been removed. Because you know, for a very long time, aviation, FDI was allowed, but however foreign carriers were not being allowed. Even after that change to the FDI policy was made, there were a lot of people who were lobbying to make sure that no airline comes into India and Indian airline remains an Indian investment driven industry. Finally, now we have seen a major player getting FDI. Even though the amount I would say is not very big, just 2,000 crore, because the Indian industry, people feel now needs almost 30,000 crore.
Lots more to come.
Yeah, very, very small bit, but a major hurdle crossed. And for facilitating this deal, the government has done many things. On the one hand, they are also talking about a bilateral investment protection agreement with UAE. On the other hand, they are also giving more bilateral rights to Abu Dhabi. That discussions are all. So the government is sending out a message that it is willing to go the extra mile to facilitate FDI. If they do it for all the players and if the entire industry gets a lot of FDI, it's going to be very good for the industry as well as the consumers. Right. That's what I look forward to.
Mr. R. Krishnan, would you agree with Mr. Ganapathy's analysis?
My point is, when you were talking about FDI in domestic aviation, was it supposed to serve your international market or was it supposed to serve your domestic market? This issue has not been clarified till date.
It's a question many people ask.
See, the point is, when all the Indian carriers were in serious trouble, including Jet Airways, they have I think outstanding about 12,000 crores. They had debts also and also what they had to pay for the aircrafts. So all of them were in serious trouble. So government decided that if we get foreign investment from foreign airlines into it, new managerial practices, technical, all those things will come. If all this investment is supposed to be used only for funneling passengers out of India to international destinations, what do the domestic passengers get? See, if you look at 100 million passengers traveling, it's only about 35 are international, 65 are domestic. What are we going to get? Will Jet drop fares on the domestic route is a question number one. After all, you must know that Indigo displaced Jet to become number one. Right. So that's an issue which has to be looked at very, very seriously, because what was the idea of a policy? Secondly, it's very good that Etihad has come into Jet Airways, and you must know one thing, that Etihad has valued Jet at 8,500 crores or so. An airline which has been in existence for 18 years. This May, I think May 5th or so, they'll be 18 years complete. They have more than 100 aircrafts. 55% of Jet's revenues come from international operations. There is neither Indigo nor Spice or Go are anywhere near that. So if you go about now valuing either Indigo or Spice or Go, there will be nowhere this thing. So if you talk about a 24% sale by any of these airlines, it won't be even 500 crores or 1,000 crores.
Right.
Okay, so that's one issue. Secondly, by doing this thing, you are going to hurt Air India.
Yeah,
So
I want to talk about that. I think it's a very important point.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Air India in just a second. I've been told that I've been joined by Mr. Ajai Singh, founder of SpiceJet Airlines. But before I go to Mr. Ajai Singh, he'll have to wait for just a little bit longer. Mr. Sanat Kaul has joined us as well. Mr. Kaul, you heard what Ganapathy and Mr. R. Krishnan just said. Would you agree that this perhaps, there are some questions there, of course. There are some pertinent questions being raised by some people. But do you think on the whole, it's a positive development for the Indian aviation industry?
I think we are talking about two issues. One is FDI by foreign airlines in Indian airlines. 17 years back, this issue was open. There were investments by foreign airlines in domestic airline, and Jet was one which had foreign airlines in it as an investor. So this is one issue which has happened. It has reversed the thing. But as Mr. Krishnan has pointed out, what is the implication of this? One is that the airlines get money. The second is, what does Etihad get? Etihad gets a fantastic domestic market, and they want to take out passengers from this domestic market to their hub in Abu Dhabi and then take passengers forward. So it's a win-win for both, but at the same time, is India going to lose? Yes, India may lose the possibility of creating its own hubs.
Right, right.
So that is a very important issue which must be looked into. Second, let me complete.
Yeah.
The second issue is there seems to be some link that there will be a massive increase in the number of seats to Abu Dhabi, to UAE. Now that has nothing to do with FDI, and frankly, I don't see how that link should be considered as established. Giving sovereign rights to another country is based on many, many considerations, and this should not be, FDI should not be a consideration for that, because then we are creating problems for other airlines, for other countries.
Point taken, sir.
So, yeah.
Point taken, sir. I want to get Ajay Singh into the discussion right now. Many thanks, Ajay, for joining us on The Big Picture. Welcome back to the program. Your view, your thoughts, or the first thoughts on the Jet-Etihad deal. SpiceJet, as we all know, has been the talk of town, of course. With media reports coming in for months now about a possible stake sale. That people say that this sets a valuation benchmark for airlines like SpiceJet. Your thoughts on the Jet-Etihad deal, first up?
I think the deal is very welcome. First of all, as a signal in the larger economy, which really needs investment, it's a great signal. I think FDI coming into Indian economy is a great signal. It signals the success of the Indian government's policy of opening up FDI in aviation, and this is the first deal which has happened. So from that perspective, it's a great thing.
Right.
I think it embellishes the fact that most foreign airlines are looking at growth markets, India being one of the very few growth markets which are open to them. And just as Jet and Etihad have done a deal, we are very confident that other airlines in India will also be approached for such transactions by foreign airlines looking for growth in the world market. And therefore, it's good news, I think, for the aviation sector.
Right. Going back to Ganapathy Subramaniam right now, you heard what Ajay Singh had to say. Now, AirAsia first, now the Jet-Etihad deal. What does this really mean for Indian aviation? We know that foreign investors coming in is a very good thing. And like Mr. R. Krishnan pointed out, this is just a slice we need far more money in Indian aviation. This deal, people say, will open up India for Etihad, huge market for them. But it will also open up the world for Jet. Isn't that good news for domestic carriers?
Athar, first of all, I would like to point out to something which has not been spoken about. Kingfisher Airlines.
Right.
Why is Kingfisher Airlines dead? Kingfisher was also trying to get FDI because of a lot of reasons, market conditions, etc., management, technology. So many factors went into it. Finally, the carrier went down. Immediately, what happened? Domestic fares went up, and that has really affected growth. Now, Ajay Singh knows how difficult it was to revive SpiceJet and put it into the spotlight back in the race.
They got the money at the right time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, if that doesn't happen, if the gates are not open, then there are a lot of difficulties for the entire industry. Similarly, Mr. Kaul knows very well how Air India has been struggling and is still struggling. Now, we have given 3,000 crores to Air India. That is government money, that is our money, your money and my money, taxpayers' money. Now, how much more is going to be invested into Air India, and how will these deals impact Air India? The government has to get the big picture clear. If it is clear, and if they make the rules even for everybody and allow free competition, definitely it's going to be good for the consumer, but it should not be cherry picking, very piecemeal kind of policy decision.
It shouldn't be selective. That's what you're saying. A very, very important point. I'll take a small break right now. We'll come back. We have lots more to talk about. We talk about Air India as well. We talk about what it will do for the consumers, for the passengers, and a couple of other questions, a couple of, you could say, negatives. But that's after the break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We are talking about the Jet-Etihad deal, of course. Before I come to Mr. R. Krishnan in the studio, I want to go very quickly across to Mr. Ajai Singh and ask him this. Ajay Singh, great news for passengers. People say that consumers are looking at a win-win. Your thoughts?
I think it's very good news for the passengers because they get to fly abroad at a lower cost for sure. All these passengers trying to go to Europe and to the US will now be able to go through Abu Dhabi, and certainly increased competition on these international routes will mean lower fares. Lower fares also, in a sense, benefit airlines, though in the short run, they might lead to some cost cutting and constraints and financial, problems for the airlines. In the longer run, as you lower fares, you increase the size of the pie, and you have many more people flying, and so the base of flyers increases. So all in all, I think it's a good thing for the aviation sector.
Right. Mr. R. Krishnan, thoughts on that? Consumers win-win?
No. So I partially agree with what Ajay Singh said. But the issue is, as I told you again, the policy was also meant for domestic operations. Right. What Ajay Singh says repeatedly, lower fares for going abroad. What about fares within our own country? You can keep on saying government, taxes, all these issues, you can keep on saying it. But the policy was that it will help these people to make money in that. Now, this kind of money, if it comes from Jet, will Jet increase its domestic operations, not merely being a spoke to Abu Dhabi? Will they increase the number of flights? Will they drop fares? Will there be a real competition so that the domestic passenger, who constitutes nearly 68% of the Indian traveling public, both inside and outside, will they benefit or not?
Right.
That question has not
the
been
big
asked.
question mark over there.
That's the most important issue. Secondly, let me tell you one thing. As I told you, Emirates has got a market share of 13.04% for traffic going out of India, whereas Jet had 15% and Air India had about 11%. Now, Abu Dhabi will have the same amount, 50,000 seats a week, plus what Jet feeds into it. So it's quite possible in 3 years' time, Abu Dhabi or Etihad could be equal to Emirates. So that will certainly shrink Air India, not Jet Airways. And that is where the whole issue comes, what Ganapathy said. I must make the point. If you are going to spend 3,000 crores, already you have spent, and you want to bring 30,000 crores over 6 years, it's going to be a complete waste of money. I think the government should not waste taxpayers' money. Let Air India go a natural death.
Let me go take the same question to Mr. Sanat Kaul now. Mr. Kaul, AirAsia coming in first, now the Etihad deal, the Jet-Etihad deal, if I could call it that. This will surely mean, people say, and analysts say, aviation experts like you have written, I was reading the papers today as well, this will mean more intense competition among Indian carriers, but the effect is not all positive. The worst affected, like Mr. Krishnan said, and like Mr. Ganapathy said, will be Air India with a ridiculously high debt to equity ratio. This particular deal could push Air India to the brink.
Well, I think Air India should also look for now foreign direct investment of an airline. In 2001, it had completed more or less a deal with Singapore Airline and Tata's, which fell through, and then 9/11 took place. And I think it's very important that Air India should not depend on taxpayers' money, but should now put its act together and get some FDI through some foreign airline into it. So that's Air India's stake. The second thing is, which Mr. Krishnan said, that domestic sector is very important, and domestic sector is riddled with taxes and all sorts of instruments which government has imposed. Now, is this thing going to improve the domestic sector? We need to deepen the domestic sector innovation very much. And will this happen or not happen? I don't know. And the other thing is, will the prices come down? Will the passengers be better off? There's a general impression that passengers will be better off, but maybe only for going abroad, not for domestic travel.
Right.
So that has to be looked into. Third is, and that's very important, that these deals are taking place. All right, India has opened up its FDI market, but is it reciprocal? Can India invest in countries like UAE? I don't think so. I don't think they allow any aviation investment in India. So there has to be some reciprocity which should be also taken care of, because India's domestic market is huge potentially.
Right.
Potentially it's going to be huge, and therefore if these people who have deep pockets, they look to a very big market, one of the biggest markets in the world.
Right, right.
And that has to be taken into account as the
point taken.
Future for these things.
Point taken. Ajay Singh, hear me out now. There has been some criticism of the deal in some section of the media. Some of my studio guests, of course, we were talking before the show as well. Various reports terming the deal as a perfect case of crony capitalism as well, and vested interests driving whimsical policy and selective opening up of the sector as well. How would you respond to that? Does that argument make any sense to you?
I don't think this is a valid argument. You see, FDI in aviation was constrained for so long without there being much logic to it. You know, these were sectors which were supposed to be sensitive, and many such sectors had been opened up in the past. The telecom sector, for example, had very little FDI, and then it was increased, and then it was increased to 74%. The aviation sector also has been asking for a very long time to say that, look, FDI must be increased in the sector. Now that it has been done, it's welcome news. It brings in capital for Indian Airlines, it brings in technology and know-how, it brings in connectivity, and therefore brings in traffic as well for the airlines in India. So I think these thoughts are misplaced. Some of the points made by our other guests in terms of Air India in itself needs a completely separate discussion. There is lots which is wrong with Air India. Air India has been like a bull in a china shop as far as the Indian aviation sector is concerned. On one hand, you allow an Air India to bring down fares, forcing the other Indian airlines to bring down fares and thereby lose money. And the losses of Air India are then funded by the government of India, which is completely an absurd situation. The government needs to really rethink its policy on Air India and try and create a level playing field for all players.
Right.
But as far as FDI in aviation is concerned, I think it should be wholeheartedly welcome.
Would you like to respond to that?
No, on the issue of comparison which you made for telecom and what Ajay Singh said, I think it's a completely wrong comparison. You cannot say that you can make only 1 million calls between Delhi and Bombay, and therefore will be allowed only 2 calls. It is not like that. Telecom market is entirely different. I know he worked with a minister earlier, but it's a completely wrong comparison between telecom and aviation. Aviation is a different game. Telecom is a different game. Perhaps, you know, maybe there's a reason not to say that, but it is wrong to compare it. And again, I'll tell you one thing on this particular issue. Tomorrow, Qatar is going to come, because if, as I told you, India, US, Emirates has got 17% market share. Qatar has got 8% market share.
There are others as well. Tiger Airways is waiting.
I'm just going to that. Now, Qatar is a very major producer of gas. We have deep economic relations with them. If Qatar says, we also want the same thing, will you allow it? Because they say, all right, you have to go and tie up. Only then we'll give it. Then will that argument not apply to Emirates? Because Emirates has got all these bilaterals without a strategic tie-up. Qatar will ask for the same thing. How do you deal with it? So will you have a situation where there's 3 people in UAE and in the Gulf handling about 48% of India's market? What happens to Spice will not grow, Indigo will not grow, Air India will not grow. This is what I'm saying.
Before I take a break, I want to get Ganapathy's views on this. Tomorrow, if Qatar comes or Tiger comes, they'll say, look, you gave it to Etihad, we also want the same thing. Does this deal set a bad precedence then?
Athar, I travel frequently to Chennai because the Pudi Talabere channel, which I work for, is headquartered there. There is a lot of buzz there because Air Asia has come there. They have already recruited some cabin crew, they are recruiting some pilots. People there feel that with that airport getting a new terminal and all that, and Air Asia coming, there will be a lot of competition, there will be a lot of buzz, and there will be generally growth in aviation. Fares going down is one part of it, but also overall growth. This kind of competition should be allowed, but as I said earlier, it should be open to everybody. For first, like Ajay Singh said, Air India is a separate, why should it be separate? Privatize Air India, allow foreign investors to come and pick up stake in Air India also, then it becomes level playing field and then everybody compete. That will be the best solution the government can approach. Whether they will do it or not, that is doubtful.
I'll come to you, Mr. Krishnan, but I have to take a break right now. After the break, we'll go to Mr. Sanat Kaul first and then Mr. Krishnan. I want to take up a point that Mr. Sanat Kaul made just before he spoke it the first time. We'll come back after a break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the big picture. I want to go to Mr. Sanat Kaul first. Mr. Kaul, you mentioned before that India perhaps has lost the opportunity of becoming a big hub. Now, with this deal, Abu Dhabi can now become yet another hub of westbound traffic. It can be a second Dubai, if you will. But does that necessarily mean that India has lost out its chance?
No, it doesn't necessarily mean. The basic issue which I was trying to raise was that there are 2 separate issues. One is FDI by foreign airlines in the domestic airlines of India, and second is giving away sovereign rights. Now, these are not interlinked. If Etihad is investing in Jet, that's it. Why should it be linked up with the very large number of sovereign rights of being given to them? There is, this has no connection with it. They are simply making an investment. And as Mr. Krishnan said, that basically we look towards a good domestic market rather than pulling out Indians and taking them away. That is being done by so many other airlines. So that is one thing. The other side is that FDI, 17 years back, there was FDI by foreign airlines in India. So it's nothing new to India. We had, in fact, why was it closed? Why was it closed is another serious chapter where maybe the word that you took, crony capitalism, came in. And therefore, it was closed down. Now, after 17 years, it is being opened again. So it is not like telecom sector. The facility for foreign airlines to invest in India, in domestic sector, in Indian Airlines was present 17 years back. It was closed down deliberately by the government. Now it has been opened up deliberately.
Right.
So there is no difference. Giving sovereign rights to one particular country in proportion which is much more than expected will not be fair.
Right.
And therefore, that needs to be studied very carefully. These are two separate issues.
Right, sir. Mr. Krishnan first, then Mr. Sanat, Mr. Ajai Singh after.
We were talking about Air Asia, reference to Air Asia every now and then, and also to Etihad. You must know, when you're talking about Air Asia, it's a brand new airline. It has to complete 5 years, 20 aircraft to go fly abroad or whatever it is. Air Asia is flying into India. Jet-Etihad deal is flying out of India. So let us not compare these two things. They are two different things completely. Completely, they are two different things. As far as what Mr. Sanat Kaul had said about, we should not mix the two, fine. But the point which I am trying to make is, how is it a strange coincidence that you sign an MOU, give them all the additional bilaterals, and the deal is done? So this deal which has been done has been sweetened by this thing. This could have been done 6 months earlier, it could have been done 6 months later. So now, having done this thing, you are created a policy kind of distortion that anybody else who wants to invest in India is going to get this thing. If, as I said, Qatar comes in or say Singapore comes in, are you going to say no?
Will they all have to be sweetheart deals?
No, most importantly, see, for instance, Lufthansa has been asking that we want to bring in our 380s. For the last 3 years, the ministry has not permitted, government has not permitted. Can you stop them now? After all, if they come in, the fares will fall even more. Because in a day, you'll have so many people going in. So why not we allow that also?
Right.
So you see, we are going back to a situation where India will provide all the passengers, but its own MROs, its own engineering facilities, its own cabin crew training, its own acquisition of wide-body aircrafts by Indian carriers, I think is serious doubt it may not happen.
I want to take that question to Mr. Ajai Singh. Mr. Ajai Singh, respond to that. Will all future deals now, will they have to be sweetheart deals? Otherwise, they won't really work?
No, I don't think so. I think the deals will happen on the basis of the requirement of a particular time. If Abu Dhabi today asked for a certain number of seats and the government felt that it was appropriate to give them those number of seats, the government has gone and done it. You can't stop a particular transaction from going through or a particular policy from going through based on what might conceivably happen at a date which is hypothetical and in the future. I think what we need to do is we need to create an environment where there is enough competition, where there is a level playing field. And this is an environment which will enable both the Indian consumer as well as the airlines in India to benefit. Right. So if SpiceJet and Indigo want to compete, they must compete in a competitive environment, and that is what will be good for passengers. If they cannot do that, then they should just shut down and be closed.
Fair point. I take your point.
Of course, it's extremely important that the Air India issue be resolved. That is something that all the guests have been pointing out, and that needs to be done. There needs to be a level playing field, and once that is done, there should be freedom in the economy. There should the government's policy should encourage competition and greater flights in and out of India.
Right. I have time for one more question. I think I give the last word to Ganapathy Subramaniam on the show. Does this deal then, sir, point to clearer skies for aviation, and after a prolonged period of turbulence, very tough market to operate in, some flawed policy decisions, whimsical policy some would call it, what does the future of Indian aviation look like to you?
Right now, the situation is quite balanced. The economy is depressed. Aviation industry is not in good shape at all. Therefore, what the government needs to do is expand the airport infrastructure, reduce taxes. Crude oil prices are going to come down further. The benefit should go to the airline industry to revive itself. And also, as far Air India is concerned, which everybody considers to be a major problem and drag, what the government can do is use its best diplomatic efforts, speak to the Singapore government, sell stake to Singapore Airlines as was planned earlier, and also privatize the airline, give half the equity to Indian companies and give some portion of the equity to Singapore Airlines and privatize it. That will be the best, and that will ultimately benefit consumers as well, which is the most important thing is the consumers, not the industry, not the FDI, it is the consumers. Everything is for the consumer. So they should do whatever is in the best interest of the consumer.
Right. Very quickly, sir, I have about 20 seconds left. High time Air India was privatized?
No, Air India can be privatized provided you remove 50% of the staff. It is highly overstaffed, nobody will buy it, nobody will touch with a pair of tongs. You have to downsize Air India drastically, then only it can be up for sale.
On that note, sir, we'll have to conclude the program. I must thank all my guests who joined me on the Big Picture tonight. Sanat, Kaul, many thanks for joining us. Ajay Singh, always a pleasure. Mr. Ganapathy, Subramaniam, as well as Mr. R. Krishnan. That's all the time we have. My guests made themselves really clear. This is a good deal. Yes, it can be good for consumers in the short term as well, but mostly going out of India. What happens really to domestic consumers, domestic fares? That's the big question mark right there. That's all the time we have. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching The Big Picture.